Alright guys, and welcome back to the channel, and today I will be giving you my full card predictions and breakdown for UFC 311 live Saturday, January 18th from Inglewood, California, and I absolutely cannot wait to get into it, and we are going to go ahead and jump right into the very first fight of the night, which is Tagir Ulanbekov versus Clayton Carpenter, and a fantastic matchup here at flyweight. We have the up-and-coming streaking Clayton Carpenter at 8-0 up against the somewhat UFC veteran Tagir Ulanbekov at 15-2, and he is just an absolute Russian wrestling terminator. Great jiu-jitsu, great grappling, very, very hard to deal with. And Clayton Carpenter has some excellent jiu-jitsu on his end. He is sitting at 8-0 right now, only 28 years old. A lot of potential, coming off recent wins of Lucas Roca by submission. Before that, we have Juan Camilo Ronderos by submission, and before that, his win over Edgar Chairez on Dana White's Contender Series. So the kid has been looking very impressive lately, very solid and, just excellent in the jiu-jitsu for his age, but he is going up against a just Russian grappling terminator, and even though Tagir Ulanbekov, did pick up a loss to Tim Elliott. That was back, 2 years ago, 9 months, almost 3 years ago. He did have that hiccup in the road, but Tagir Ulanbekov, when it comes to the Dagestan and Russian wrestlers and submission grapplers, you're just not going to get much better than that. Those guys are so hard to deal with. They are so top level, so elite in those areas, and it's just really hard to pick against those guys when it comes to a fight. And in this fight, I am not going to give Clayton Carpenter that chance, unfortunately. Even though he's streaking and he's looking very impressive for his age, this is going to be a tough test for him. And he has never been submitted. He has no losses on his record. But Tagir Ulanbekov, I think, will just comfortably control this entire fight with grappling. I think he will out-grapple Clayton Carpenter. He will outpace him. He may submit him. I went back and forth on a finish on this. He might catch Clayton Carpenter in a submission in the second or third round of this fight. But I think Clayton Carpenter might be able to fend those off, but he's not going to be able to stay off bottom, and he's not going to be able to stay off the clinch on the cage. So I am going Tagir Ulanbekov by unanimous decision. All right, moving on up, we are looking at Grant KGD Dawson versus the veteran Diego Ferreira, and this is a very interesting fight because, Grant Dawson, was on a really, really big hot streak for quite a while, and then he got absolutely caught and smoked by Bobby Green. And let's see, that was back, a few months ago. Actually, it was already a year ago. Wild time flies. That feels like that happened like 6 months ago, but Bobby Green did catch him, knock him out for the huge upset, but he has gotten back on track with the wins over Joe Selecki, a phenomenal grappler and jiu-jitsu fighter himself, and before that, Rafa Garcia with the TKO ground and pound. But, in this fight, I think it's very interesting, and even though I think Grant Dawson has gotten back on track, he is the better grappler, he's a little more well-rounded, for the most part. Diego Ferreira, at 40 years old, is kind of having a second career resurgence now. He has put on some phenomenal performances in his last two fights, knocking Michael Johnson out cold in that fight when Michael Johnson, in classic fashion, is winning a fight and then he gets knocked out and loses. He just cannot maintain a lead. Up until recently, when he just had the knockout a few weeks ago that was phenomenal, the knockout that he needed, the knockout that we all know Michael Johnson is capable of if he can maintain a lead. But, absolutely slept Michael Johnson with the Josh Emmett overhand right and just blew him across the cage backwards. And then after that, he had a fantastic war with Mateusz Rebecki, which, he was the underdog in that fight, and Mateusz Rebecki started off strong, but then Diego Ferreira just came back and broke him and beat him down and TKO'd him. So this is a very interesting fight where I am not counting Diego Ferreira out at all. Diego Ferreira is dangerous on the feet. He's got knockout power and he's got great grappling. But I'm going to go ahead and trust that Grant Dawson has corrected the defensive mistakes that got him caught by Bobby Green, and I think his grappling, his pace, and his pressure will be enough to beat Diego. But if Grant Dawson makes any mistakes in this fight and he slips up, hands down, not moving his head, any kind of mistakes like that, Diego Ferreira could catch him with a bomb and knock him out. But I'm going to trust Grant Dawson can maintain the lead, edge the grappling, edge the control, set the pace, and I think he will pick up a 30-27 unanimous decision on Diego Ferreira. Maybe Diego steals around from him. that might happen, but at the very least, I think Grant Dawson takes a 29-28 unanimous decision. So Grant Dawson by decision is the pick. And we are moving on up to Ricky Turcios versus Bernardo Sopaj. And interesting fight here at bantamweight. Ricky Turcios, high level, pretty scrappy grappler, fights out of Team Alpha Male with Uriah Faber. They're all fantastic grapplers, all, fantastic, strong submission fighters. But Ricky Turcios has just not been super impressive. He's been very up and down, win-lose, win-lose. And his only recent wins have been by split decision. So they have been very, very close fights, and he's scrappy. He's scrambly, but he's not really good in any one particular area outside of that. I mean, his striking's not that good. His wrestling is not that solid. He's got a good high level, just scrappy style. And outside of that, on the other side, Bernardo Sopaj, he had a vicious loss, and I believe it was his UFC debut. Yeah, so Vinicius Oliveira was his UFC debut, and in that fight, we all saw that insane knockout where he was just getting beat down by Vinicius, and I believe Vinicius hit him with a leg kick, and he went to limp and kind of run away from Vinicius, and Vinicius ran across that octagon and hit him with a flying knee fatality, and just dropped him out cold. So it was a vicious knockout loss for Bernardo Sopaj. Very hard to watch. And all the quiet of the apex, too. You could just hear that knee crush his skull. But in this fight, even though I think Ricky Turcios is scrappy and he does have some potential, I'm not fully on his train. I think he is very beatable if he fights the right guy. If he fights a high-level technical striker or a fighter with just fantastic grappling and good solid wrestling defense, I think that they're going to beat him all day. And with Bernardo Sopaj, even though he was doing okay in the Vinicius Oliveira fight in moments and he did get caught, I'm going to trust him to actually win this fight. I think he should be able to outstrike Ricky Turcios on the feet. I think he should be able to hold off and defend the takedowns. Maybe it gets close and there's some high-level scrambling and back and forth flip-flopping. But I think he's just going to be the more technical fighter, and I think he will recover from this vicious knockout loss. He's still very young, only 24 years old, considerably younger than Ricky Turcios, which is crazy because he almost looks much older than Ricky Turcios. But I'm going to give the kid a chance and say that he's going to be the cleaner, more technical fighter, and he's going to be better everywhere. And Ricky Turcios is just kind of, he's okay. So we are going to go Bernardo Sopaj by decision on this one. And moving on up, we are looking at the red-hot Peyton Talbott versus Ronnie Barcelos. And Ronnie Barcelos is, he's a UFC veteran. He's been around a long time. He is up there in age. He's 37 years old. And he is, starting to kind of hit a little bit of a downslope, even though he's coming off a win against Christian Quinones, picking up the submission there. Before that, he lost to Kyler Phillips, who's just an absolute nightmare to deal with, a whirlwind of just attack on the feet. And before that, Umar Nurmagomedov, who is, actually getting a title fight on this card. So, it's been a little bit of a tough run for Ronnie Barcelos there. But even at his age, 37, he's still doing pretty well. But Peyton Talbott has been an absolute assassin. The kid, I am a full believer. I was never a doubter. The kid has just been so impressive with his knockout, over Cameron Simon. Just the precision, the power, the technique in his shots. And in his last fight, dropping Giannis Gamora with that straight right hand down the middle, one shot done. The kid is just so deadly on the feet, and his precision in that boxing is fantastic. And even in this fight, even though I think it's a kind of an interesting fight in a few ways, I think Peyton Talbott, all the hype is there. The hands, the boxing, everything is just so crisp, and the power and his confidence. He's calm, he's technical, he's tactical. And I think Ronnie Barcelos is going to get caught early in this fight. Historically, he's pretty tough. He doesn't get... Let's see, he's been knocked... Umar did hit him with the body kick and knocked him out, but outside of that, most of his losses have kind of been by decision, so he can kind of take a beating. Excuse me, but Peyton Talbott, that precision is just... It's a problem, that speed, that power, and I think he will catch Ronnie Barcelos in the first round and knock him out, and that streak continues, and he moves to 10-0, becoming one of the most impressive prospects we have in the company right now. If he doesn't catch Ronnie Barcelos with that shot in the first round, then definitely the second, but I am going to put a lot of confidence and a lot of bet that Talbott is finishing Ronnie Barcelos somewhat early in this fight. All right, moving on up. We are looking at Zachary Reese versus Cedric Dumas. And interesting fight here at middleweight. And Cedric Dumas, he's come in. He's been pretty tough. Nothing super standout about the guy. Pretty decent striking, good movement. In his last fight, unfortunately, well, he did pick up the win against Dennis Tululin, but before that, he had the fight with Nursultan Ruziboev, who is a big problem right now, and Nursultan poked him in the eye, and the referee didn't see it, and Cedric was backing up going, hey, I got poked, and the ref didn't do anything. Nursultan closed in on him, dropped him with shots, and TKO'd him, so it was an unfortunate loss there. He should have gotten the eye poke break, but the ref didn't see it, unfortunately, so I will give him a pass on that loss, and, Nursultan's huge, fantastic, long-range striker. But on the other hand, Zachary Reese has just been, a savage, and the nickname is, very fitting here. Zachary Reese coming off the win against Jose Mendez. Before that, Julian Marquez with a nasty uppercut KO. And then he did have the loss to Cody Brundage where he got slammed and KO'd. But that was kind of just like a freak situation there. But in this fight, I think it's an interesting scrap. This could be very back and forth in ways. But I think Zach Reese just has the upside in this fight. He's got the slightly sharper hands, the slightly better technique, and he's got a little more finishing upside than Cedric does. But Cedric hangs in there, and his striking is not bad at all. He's got good technique, and he's young, and he's building it, and he's getting there. But I think Zach Reese is just going to be too much on the feet in this fight. And, it will be back and forth in moments, but I think Reese is just going to edge him round to round. And I think Zach Reese will pick up a unanimous 30-27 decision over Cedric Dumas in a very good fight. He could finish him. He could wind up knocking him out. Zach Reese has, way more finishes than decisions. He might have all finishes outside of his loss. But, he's got arm bars. He's picked up rear naked chokes, TKO. So I do think that he will beat Cedric in this fight. All right, and moving on up, we are looking at Karol Rosa versus Ailin Perez, and interesting fight here in women's bantamweight. Karol Rosa, very, very up and down, win-lose, as you can see here. Coming off the rematch win to Peani Kanzid, then the loss to Irene Aldana, Yana Santos. But Ailin Perez has been very solid. She has been streaking. She's been picking up a lot of decision wins. Her grappling has, been very hard to deal with. Her control's been very hard to deal with. Picking up wins against Lucy Pudilova, Jocelyn Edwards, who's a very good kickboxer, and then Dara Zelena Zonyakov. Jesus. Wow, didn't see that one coming. But, she's just been very good with the grappling, very good in just her technique there. And with Karol Rosa, even though she's only 30, they're both 30, they're both very young, I think Karol Rosa's ceiling is kind of low. I don't really ever see her being on a streak or really improving that much. I think Ailin Perez has more room to improve as a fighter. And I think that the grappling is just going to be too much here. This is just a simple cut and dry fight. I think she will out-edge Karol Rosa with that grappling to a clean 30-27 decision. All right, and moving on up to a very interesting fight here at light heavyweight. We are looking at Johnny Walker versus the newly fresh and pretty much debuting Bogdan Guskov. He has had 2 fights in the UFC so far, but he still just feels so fresh and so new to the company. And it almost seems like those fights happen very close together, actually within 2 months of each other. So he's had some pretty quick turnarounds there in these wins. And in this fight, Johnny Walker, when he first came into the company, he looked like he was going to be a problem. Big, long, rangy, crazy dynamic attacks, crazy just tornado style spin kicks, spinning back fists, a lot of movement, a lot of just in and out. And, Johnny Walker looked like a real problem. And then he had the loss to Corey Anderson, and he just hit a wall, basically. And ever since he lost to Corey Anderson, he's just been more downhill than uphill. He's had a lot of losses. He's gotten knocked out viciously many times. He did pick up a few wins down the road after Corey, but then he's just been right back to the losses. We look at the record here. Magomed caught him with the left hand behind the head, right hand hook, and then broke his nose on the punch at the bottom of the cage. And then Volkan Oezdemir dropped him against the cage and slept him with an uppercut punch. So, it's been tough for Johnny Walker, and he is not dependable at all to try to pick him in a fight. And even though Bogdan Guskov we don't have a whole lot on him just yet, even though he's looked very impressive. You know, the competition he has fought has not been super high level. Ryan Spann is very up and down. He's, you know, he's starting to kind of settle into a groove. Ryan Spann's coming off a very impressive win, so maybe Ryan Spann is officially starting to kind of streak in his own. But Ryan Spann was having a lot of, you know, up and down when he fought Bogdan Guskov. So in this fight, you know, I just think Johnny Walker is just, it's so hard to pick him. It's so hard to depend on him because his defense is poor. You know, right when you think he's going to get in and land a, you know, a crazy dynamic shot, he makes a mistake and just gets blasted and put out cold. And even though Bogdan's level of competition is not super high yet, he's been very impressive with the hands. Very, very accurate shots. And what he did to Zach Paunga was very impressive. Caught him with a right hook, I believe. Zach Paunga started to kind of wobble, and then he just followed him up 1, 2, 3, 4 while Zach Paunga's falling, and then Zach was just out. So, I mean, Bogdan's hands are just, you know, fantastic, and I am going to trust that he is going to close in on Johnny Walker at some point and catch him with a big shot and put him out. I think this fight will kind of be at range. You know, they'll be feeling each other out for about a round. So a few shots might get landed here. Johnny Walker's probably going to land some inside leg kicks, outside leg kicks. Bogdan's going to find his timing. And then right when he starts to find that timing at the end of the round, the horn will blow. Walker will be kind of, oh, geez, like he almost took some shots. They'll come out in the second round, and Bogdan will find that shot to knock Johnny Walker out cold. But if Bogdan is not careful, he could walk into a huge flying knee from Johnny Walker. He could walk into a spinning back fist. Johnny Walker, even though for all of his faults, he is a dynamic landmine. You have to be very careful with him. So I'm going to trust that Bogdan Guskov is going to catch Johnny Walker with that shot and, you know, put him at a 3-fight losing streak. And, you know, sorry, Johnny, you got to just, we need more improvement in that defense. You know, you need to fix some holes, man, and you could be a killer. But right now, it's just not looking good for Johnny Walker. So Bogdan Guskov by second round KO is the pick. And we are moving on up to the battle of big submission grapplers. And this is such an interesting fight because these guys are such a mirror match in a way. They have pretty much the exact same fighting style. They're just both high-paced submission grapplers, you know. But Jailton Almeida, even though I called that his hype train would get derailed and Curtis Blades beat him, Jailton Almeida is still very impressive. You know, he's very athletic, he's very explosive, he's very powerful, and his submission grappling is fantastic. Now, Sergey Spivac has great submission grappling, he has great takedowns, you know, himself. But the difference in this fight is that Jailton is just faster and more athletic than Sergey Spivac. Sergey Spivac is a little slow. He can be a little plotty. He's not super explosive. He's not very athletic. But when he gets a hold of you, he can get you down. And when he gets on top of you, his submissions and his ground threat are real. But even though Jailton has, you know, he has flaws on the feet and he tends to, you know, he can eat some shots here and there. And you can see the defensive holes that can get him caught. I think it's just going to be a athleticism edge, a speed edge, and a power edge for him. And even though they are similar styles, they're both heavy submission grapplers. I think Jailton's just better there, and he has a much better record there as well, and many more submissions than Sergey Spivac. So I think in this fight, Jailton Almeida will win the grappling exchanges there. And, oh, sorry, I had a little microphone problem. And I think Jailton will get him down to the floor, get on top of him, and I think he will submit Sergey Spivac in the first round, if not the second round, because he's just going to be more experienced there, faster, higher paced, and more athletic. All right, and we are moving on up to Rena Nakamura versus Umar Nurmagomedov, and very interesting fight here at bantamweight. Rena Nakamura, I mean, absolutely streaking, 9-0 out of Japan, has looked absolutely phenomenal so far, picking up wins against Carlos Vera, Fernie Garcia, who's not great. Before that, Toshiami Kazama, I mean, the kid has just looked fantastic. And Nurmagomedov has looked pretty good himself, you know, coming off the win against Kung Ho Kang. He did have some losses to Sednar Magomedov and John Castaneda, but I mean, still a solid fighter, you know, like nothing, you know, very super underwhelming there. But in this fight, I think Rena Nakamura is just, I mean, he's streaking for a reason. The kid is so talented, and I think he's just going to be better than Muin Gafurov everywhere. I think he'll be better on the feet, he'll be better in the grappling, and this is a pretty cut and dry pick here. You know, I don't even need to go into a lot of detail. You know, he is the heavy favorite for a reason And, Nakamura's just, he's looking really good right now. So I am going to say that Renan Nakamura just beats him in all aspects of this fight and picks up the unanimous 30-27 decision on the cards. All right, and moving on up, we are looking at Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano, and a fantastic fight here at lightweight. Beneil Dariush has been around a long time, almost kind of a veteran at this point. But Beneil Dariush, even though he's had some solid wins in his career, he has been knocked out many times brutally. I mean, multiple times. He got knocked out by Edson Barbosa with the vicious flying knee. He's coming off the knockout to Arman Tsarukyan in the main event. And before that, getting knocked out by Charles Oliveira. So it has just not been looking good for Beneil Dariush for all that veteran experience. He's having a tough time right now. And he's getting up there in age. He's 35 years old. So it's been kind of hard for him. And outside of that, Renato Moicano, I'm not a big Renato Moicano fan. I think he is very beatable. He's got holes in his stand-up. I mean, clear holes in his stand-up where Jalen Turner, pretty much exposed him. I thought Jalen Turner had that fight in the bag all day, and Jalen, was outstriking him on the feet. Even Rafael Fiziev, dropped and knocked out Renato Moicano with like a vicious combination. So, Renato Moicano, he doesn't have the best chin. He doesn't have the best striking defense. And, Jalen Turner wound up dropping him with a punch and had the fight won, but he walked away. And it's like, you cannot walk away. You have to finish the opponent. You have to wait for the ref to pull you off. If your opponent is laying there still conscious, you've got to make sure that ref is there to pull you off before you walk away, or it could wind up costing you. And sure enough, Jalen walked away. He thought, Moicano was done, and Moicano recovered, and the ref let it go, and then Moicano came back and beat him. So he should have lost that fight to Jalen Turner, but Jalen made a critical mistake. And, because of that, he is now on a 4-fight win streak. Brad Riddell, Drew Dober, Jalen Turner, and most recently Benoit Saint-Denis pulling off the huge upset there, even though it was a eye-cut doctor stoppage. But in this fight, even though I'm not huge on Renato Moicano, he's still very skilled on the ground, a fantastic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter, high-level grappling, and Beneil Dariush is just kind of hitting that wall. I think he's hit his ceiling at his age, and I don't think it's going to get any better for him. I think Beneil is going to continue to take losses. He's kind of one-dimensional in ways. Like, he's got awkward power on the feet. He's had some crazy comeback KOs. He's got good grappling himself. That's his bread and butter. But I think Moicano's is just better everywhere. Moicano's just the better jiu-jitsu fighter, the higher level grappler, the stronger grappler. And I think he will get Beneil Dariush down on the ground in this fight. I think he'll mount him, and I think he will TKO him. And if he doesn't TKO him on the ground, he'll TKO him on the feet, because at 35 years old, when you're getting knocked out this viciously so much, it's eventually going to catch up to you, and that chin's not going to recover. And I just don't see Beneil Dariush being able to beat Moicano in any area in this fight. So we are going Renato Moicano, first round KO. All right, and moving on up, we are looking at Kevin the Trailblazer Holland versus Reinier de Ridder, and a huge fight here at middleweight. I will say one thing, Reinier de Ridder, Jesus. When he came into the UFC, he just recently debuted against Gerald Meerschaert. I was not impressed with him at all. I thought his stand-up looked atrocious, his defense looked atrocious, and Gerald Meerschaert was literally outstriking him for a good portion of that fight. And if you're getting outstruck by Gerald Meerschaert, that's concerning, because Gerald Meerschaert is not one of the best strikers, in the company. His striking is pretty borderline basic average. It's not that good at all. Gerald Meerschaert is just kind of a coin flip. He'll win, he'll lose, he'll win, he'll lose. He's got good submissions, but outside of that, Gerald Meerschaert is just, he's not really fantastic in any one area. And if you're getting outstruck by him with the subpar striking, that's not a good sign. So de Ridder just looked very beatable on the feet. And I was saying during that fight, if this was anybody else with higher level striking, de Ridder would have already been knocked out cold. Gerald hit him with a shot in that fight that rocked him, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy is debuting with all this hype, and he's about to get knocked out by one of the, borderline worst strikers in the division. And not that, Gerald Meerschaert's striking is horrible, but it's just not that good, if you really follow Gerald Meerschaert and you've been watching his fights for years, you know what I'm talking about. He's just very basic, and painfully basic sometimes, even though he does pull off, some crazy comeback wins sometimes. But in this fight, Kevin Holland is fantastic on the feet when he shows up and he wants a win. He's got excellent long-range striking, missile power in his hands, highly underrated jiu-jitsu, fantastic on the ground. And Kevin is a problem. When he's on fire, and he is hard to deal with. And I went back and forth on it in this fight because even though I wasn't impressed with De Ridder at all on the feet and even on the ground, his grappling didn't look that great, even though that's what he's known for. All of his wins are pretty much by submission, and he is a jiu-jitsu master. But, I mean, he even struggled with the takedowns and the grappling against Gerald in that fight. So I'm looking at this going, Kevin Holland should be able to beat him on the feet all day. Kevin's going to be the better striker, no question. He's going to be faster. He's going to have the power edge. And if De Ridder comes into this fight with that poor defense like he had against Gerald Meerschaert, he is getting dropped. And at the very least, he is getting outstruck for 15 straight minutes, and he's getting hurt and rocked bad. But my only worry is that if Kevin Holland comes into this fight and he's not fully on all cylinders and he's not firing correctly and he makes a mistake, then De Ridder could get under one of his shots, grab a body lock, trip him down, and get on top of him. And if De Ridder does get on top of him, even though the grappling didn't look super impressive in the debut, he most likely will wind up submitting Kevin Holland. So I think in this fight, this is going to be Kevin Holland's fight. I think he's going to beat him on the feet. And if he can stay on the feet, he's safe. But if De Ridder can get in on Kevin, get underneath one of those long-range shots, if Kevin overextends and he gets him down, De Ridder could wind up working his way to a submission and tapping Kevin Holland. So I think it's going to come down to Kevin is going to be mostly in control, and he's probably going to win the fight, but the only way he's going to lose is if he makes a critical wrestling defense mistake, and De Ridder just capitalizes, trips him down, drags him down, and submits him. So that's a high possibility, and he could correct those mistakes from the Gerald Meerschaert fight. But I'm going to stick with Kevin Holland and say that he just pieces Reinier De Ridder up on the feet and knocks him out, catches him with a big shot, or he just beats him 30-27 on the cards and completely outstrikes him as long as he stays on the feet. But if Reinier gets him down, Kevin will probably lose. But I'm going to give Kevin Holland a shot in this fight. All right, and moving on, we are looking at Jiri Prochazka versus Jamahal Hill, and one of the best fights of the night in the light heavyweight division. Both men are coming off vicious knockout losses to Alex Pereira. Jiri, eating that insane head kick with the follow-up TKO shots and getting just he got knocked out so hard it broke his antenna, his hair. It just snapped his antenna off, rocked him, absolutely devastated him, and it was a really hard, vicious knockout for Jiri to take. And then Jamahal Hill, kicks Alex Pereira low, hits him in the cup. Herb comes to stop it, and Alex is like, no, I got this, and hits him with like that shovel hook uppercut, drops him, knocks him out. So, they're both coming off hard knockout losses, and, before that, Jiri did get knocked in the first fight, but it wasn't as bad, and it was kind of a close stoppage where you're like, he wasn't fully out, but, you could understand it. And, in this fight, it's such an interesting matchup because, Jiri Prochazka is so dynamic. He's an absolute whirlwind of attack. He's an absolute whirlwind of just constant movement, switching stances, just in and out, in and out. He never stops moving, and he is just a constant barrage coming at you. And Jamahal Hill is just more straightforward. He's a very calm, very patient, very tactical striker, but he's a dog. Jamahal Hill will start off downloading you, finding his range, throwing those lefts to the body, throwing those hooks, throwing some leg kicks, trying to figure you out. And Jamahal Hill's a little more one-dimensional in that way, where Jiri Prochazka is just this constant, just frenetic storm. And it's such an interesting matchup because it's like just a calm technical fighter who's just tactical and tries to download what you're doing versus just storm and blitz of shots and movement and reads. So it's very, very interesting, and I can see Jiri Prochazka giving Jamahal Hill trouble early in this fight, where just Jamal's trying to figure him out, and Yuri's just in and out, landing kicks, landing jabs, landing shots down the middle. But I really sat and thought about it, and I'm looking at the amount of knockouts that the amount of knockout losses that Jiri has had. The knockout to Alex Pereira, was just so vicious. It rocked him so hard. He got pulled up on the stool, was just so out of it. And then the knockout in the first one, he did get caught there. And I'm starting to wonder if, this damage is going to start to kind of catch up to Jiri a little bit, and start to take some miles off that clock and miles off that chin. And, even though Jamahal got dropped and knocked out by Alex, he has not taken nearly the amount of damage. Jamahal has never been knocked out before. He got stopped by Paul Craig when he broke his arm, but outside of that, Jamahal Hill has not really taken any bad damage in a fight. Glover Teixeira hit him with some big shots, but Alex Pereira was his only bad KO. And in this fight, I'm looking at it and I'm going to trust that Jamahal Hill, that technique, that patience will get the job down. Will get the job done when Jiri comes in, switching stances and throwing some of these kicks and throwing a lot of these in and out shots. I think Jamahal Hill will just be slick enough to step out of range and touch him. Step out of range, hit him with a body jab. Step out of range, hit him with a kick. And then when Jamahal knows that he really has to go and he really needs to seal this fight, then that dog will come out. And I think that Jamahal Hill is fully prepared to just go ape shit on Jiri Prochazka. I mean, hunt him down like he did Thiago Santos, get in his face and just start ripping on him. He has to be careful because Jamahal could get caught and get knocked out. But if Jamahal needs to bring that dog out, that dog is hard to deal with. And I mean, he will smell blood and he won't stop until that ref pulls him off. So I think Jiri's got a good chance in this fight to pull off a decision win with the pace and the busyness and the volume. But I'm going to trust that Jamahal is just going to stick to his technique, stick to his patience, and then he's going to bring that dog out. And he's just going to beat he's going to beat Jiri to the punch and just the more important moments and all the solid exchanges that I expect him to pull off. So I'm going to say that Jamahal Hill catches Jiri Prochazka with a shot in the second round and possibly knocks him out. He most likely will not. He'll if he's going to win, it's probably going to be a decision. But I'm going to say, coming off the knockout loss to Alex Pereira, that this could be kind of devastating for him now, to where maybe he just doesn't recover as well. And I think Jamahal will catch him with a big shot, a clean technical shot, and wind up TKOing him. He won't knock Jiri out cold, but I think he will wind up TKOing him. If not, he picks up the 30-27 unanimous decision. Maybe Jiri steals around and pulls off a 29-28 for Hill. All right, and we are moving on up to the co-main event of the evening, which is Merab Dvalishvili versus Umar Nurmagomedov. And super, super, super interesting fight here for the bantamweight championship. I mean, high-level wrestlers, two of the highest-level wrestlers that we have in the company. Super interesting mirror matching styles here. I mean, and almost very similar records. Merab is 18-4, but Umar is streaking and he's undefeated at 18-0. And even though, Merab has been, he's looked very impressive. He's had so many fantastic wins, beating Sean O'Malley, even though in that fight, a lot of that was just Sean O'Malley just being too afraid to exchange, too afraid to let his hands go. And he just let Merab get ahead on him. It's not like O'Malley was coming out and, throwing shots and fighting and still getting outstruck and still getting just destroyed and just dominated while he's, making an effort. It was just O'Malley came out and just kind of froze up and didn't do a lot. So it's like, yeah, if you come out and you stand in front of Merab and you don't do a lot and you're too hesitant, he's just going to work circles on you and he's going to take you down and he's going to outwork you and outpace you. And that's what happened. So O'Malley just kind of didn't show up in that fight, not to take a whole lot away from Merab, but, Merab got the job done there. And, he's had, some fantastic wins before that. Henry Cejudo picking Henry up and slamming him, dominating him. Peter Yan, so, Merab has just been on the money. But Umar is just, man, he is a different level problem. And again, those Russian wrestlers, that Dagestan wrestling, man, it's just so incredibly hard to deal with. And when you compare Russian wrestling to any other country, I'm going to favor Russian wrestling over anybody. Russian wrestling beats Georgian wrestling, 9 times out of 10 on my card, probably 10 times out of 10. And I think Umar just has so much more upside in his game. His grappling is fantastic, and then surprisingly, his striking has looked phenomenal lately. He wound up outstriking Corey Sandhagen, and Corey Sandhagen is one of the most tactical, just sniper-esque strikers and calculated strikers in the division, and he stood with Corey Sandhagen for a good portion of that fight and actually outstruck him. And that says a lot. That says a lot to sit there and just cleanly outstrike Corey Sandhagen and, just take him down and just, beat him in all those areas. So, in this fight, even though it's very, very interesting, and Merab has a very good chance with his pace and his pressure and his style, because he's kind of wild, just kind of all over the place. Umar is a little more calm in his approach, but Umar is just, I mean, he's a Terminator, and he's 18-0 for a reason. And I think his wrestling and his stand-up, if he really brings it to Merab, beats Merab all day. I mean, I cannot see Merab taking Umar Nurmagomedov down for the majority of this fight and dominating him or beating him in those areas. And I don't think Merab's striking is better than Umar's. Merab's striking is okay. He does land some shots here and there, but I think Umar is just, again, he's 18-0 for a reason, and he is that Terminator. So I am going to say Umar Nurmagomedov wins this fight. I'm going to say 49-46 on the cards, at the very least a 48-47, 3-2. And, maybe Merab makes a round or two real close early, but then I think Umar is just going to settle in, and he's going to out-edge the grappling, out-edge the pace, and he's going to out-edge the striking. So I think Umar will pick up the decision on the cards, and he will be the new bantamweight champion. All right, and moving on to the main event of the night, we have Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan 2, the rematch. And what an absolutely fantastic matchup we have here. Islam Makhachev has just been an absolute Russian Terminator, a complete machine since he has been in the UFC. I mean, with a record of 26-1. I mean, and the wins that he has picked up over the years. I mean, Dustin Poirier submitting him with the Dariush choke, head kicking Alexander Volkanovski in the rematch. Before that, beating Volkanovski in the very close first fight between them, which was a fantastic fight, and then submitting Charles Oliveira to become the lightweight champion. I mean, Islam Makhachev is just the elite of Russian grappling, the elite of just a complete Russian fighter, and he has just been looking unstoppable. And on the other side, we are looking at Arman Tsarukyan, and he's just been looking fantastic lately, picking up the very close split decision win over Charles Oliveira. Before that, knocking out Beneil Dariush with the straight right. I mean, just absolutely flooring him. Before that, beating Joaquin Silva with an absolute vicious ground and pound. And I mean, Arman Tsarukyan has just looked great lately. And it's such an interesting matchup, such an interesting rematch. And, Islam beat Arman Tsarukyan in that first fight. Very competitive fight, very fun fight. But, in this fight, it is so hard to try to think of reasons to ever pick against Islam Makhachev, because he's just been unstoppable. I mean, he's fantastic on the feet, fantastic on the ground. I mean, pretty much the best grappler in the UFC outside of Charles Oliveira, best submission grappler, and he's just so strong. He's just so good everywhere. And of course, he trains with Khabib Nurmagomedov, the former champion, and, Islam is just an absolute problem everywhere. And even though I think Arman Tsarukyan can, pose some very interesting new challenges throughout this rematch, and he could make it tough in moments, it is just so hard to pick against Islam. I don't see a area where Arman is just going to completely take over and beat Islam. I don't think he's going to beat him in the stand-up. I think he could be competitive there. I think he can maybe take a round, maybe two from, Islam if it stays on the feet and it gets real close. Maybe he impresses us with some really good, grappling defense. Maybe he even gets Islam up against the cage at a point for a little bit. But once Islam settles into the fight, I mean, I think that experience, that high-level, just caliber Russian, just Terminator mindset is just going to click in, and it's just going to wind up being a problem as the fight goes, And Arman could make this fight close in ways, and it could be super competitive, but I do think Islam is just going to be better. He's just going to edge these rounds with the better striking, the better grappling, the better control, and I think it's going to be a very solid, fun fight. And I'm going to say that Islam Makhachev picks up this win, 49-46 on the cards at the least, possibly a 50-45, and he retains his belt. And, Arman's got a chance to, maybe take a round or two, look better than he did in that first fight and improve and fix those holes. But, I'm just not going to pick against Islam Makhachev right now. It's just not going to happen. He's just too good. He's 26-1 for a reason, only 33 years old. And he's just a assassin everywhere. So, unless Arman Tsarukyan comes out and pulls off a shocking KO or just somehow has this elite grappling that just somehow actually beats Makhachev, which I highly doubt. We've seen that happen in the past sometimes in some crazy upsets where guys that are high-level grapplers wind up getting out-grappled by a guy who's not as elite historically. But I think Islam Makhachev is going to pick up this win and retain his belt. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching these predictions. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you for my predictions for 312 very soon. Take care.